Hello and welcome. Thank you for coming today. Today I'll be covering the work we've done at Hargreaves Lansdown to build an internal accessibility need research panel. I'm Zoe Portlock, accessibility lead at Hargreaves Lansdown, also known as HL, as Natalie just introduced me. I lead digital accessibility at HL. Having established it and started our journey in 2019. So I speak at conferences, I've been on podcasts, and I also write about and consult on digital accessibility for Scope, which is a UK disability charity. I'm disabled myself, mostly a mixture of chronic illnesses and neurodiversity. So my highlights, as I call them, include ME/CFS, which is chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia and chronic migraine. And then neurodiversity-wise, I am dyslexic, dyspraxic, autistic, and have purple lenses and tint my screens purple due to Erlin syndrome. So I use this lived experience to be a really tenacious advocate for my community, to drive buy-in and recognition that accessibility should be at the core of good design and good quality products. My goal is to embed accessibility in every discipline and squad to deliver equal digital experiences for every user. To describe myself, I am a white woman in her late 20s with purple hair and purple lenses in my glasses, always wearing some form of autumnal outfit, and I take great joy in choosing one of my hand-decorated walking aids to complement different looks. And I'm also the kind of cat parent that crochets miniature versions of furniture for her cats, which is a great summary of me as a person. I work at Hargreaves Lansdown, aka HL. That is a financial services company based in Bristol, England. We are the UK's biggest saving and investment platform, offering various accounts, mostly ISAs and SIPs, which are individual savings accounts and self-invested personal pensions. We have more than 2,000 colleagues, over 1.7 million clients, and over £123 billion on our platform. Our purpose as a company is to empower people to save and invest with confidence, and I ensure that people involves everyone, like those with accessibility needs. There is a branch of our business called Workplace, which is a service for companies to have HL as their dedicated pension provider for their employees. And to me, this is really important because we have hundreds of thousands of clients who never consciously decided to join HL. It was purely a part of their employer's decision-making prior to them starting their job. So I feel this really deep duty to make sure that every client, whether they did actively choose HL or not, gets equal access to all information and resources relating to their finances, the ultimate goal being equal access to every positive outcome. That is the context, so I'll jump into the actual content. So today, I'll be sharing with you HL's experience with accessibility-specific research, driven by our accessibility team and our user research team. This will include looking at the value of building relationships with disabled clients for continuous feedback leading to our research panel, how we prepared our processes to accommodate disabled participants and the challenges faced so far, including what our user researchers wanted to know to feel comfortable in leading these sessions themselves. All of this in the hope that you can take something away from this talk and apply it to your own workplaces, capturing disabled voices and experience, whatever the scale. So let's start with why gather disabled user experience. Well, accessibility feedback from real users is absolute gold dust, and I cannot stress that enough. But why is that? Well, we know from the ClickAway Pound research from 2019 that 69% of disabled people will click away from digital experiences with accessibility barriers and blockers. And only 8% of those people contact site owners about the blockers that they have experienced, which does check out with my own experience. If you feel let down by a company, you're not likely to give them more of your energy to make them aware. So when that 8% reach out, learn all you can from it. This accessibility-specific type of feedback is a rare commodity. It does not often end up directly back in the hands of companies very often. It is rare and to be contacted with this insight and should be cherished. So you may do automated testing on your journeys as a stopgap, but that will not capture everything. And even manual testing simply cannot compare to real life users who are very familiar with having to work around barriers day to day and could have years of assistive technology experience. If you want everyone to be able to use your service or your products, you need to collect feedback that is reflective of the entire population, and that includes users with a range of accessibility needs. In terms of capturing that gold dust, when people reach out to you, build relationships with them. Make it very clear that you value their experience, show that you're listening, and act upon feedback wherever possible. Having been on both sides of these conversations, I find being genuine and human is often the best approach, dropping being overly formal. So nothing tops lived experience, and individuals with access needs have often been on a really long, unseen journey, trialing out different aids, technology, and tools that can help them to find the setup that you might see in a research session. That's all a typical part of the disabled experience. And I found that getting to share real feedback and video clips from research sessions can be really powerful to inspire action, to gain buy-in, and to provide visibility of groups that are rarely seen. Many designers, developers, marketeers, and product managers have not heard what a screen reader sounds like. So exposure to that is really powerful, especially if it's going through the journeys that they spend their working hours crafting. So what is a research panel? It is a pool or a catalogue of pre-screened, pre-profiled participants that can be approached for feedback. These allow you to target and cover specific demographics and characteristics that you want represented in your research. In this case, we are looking for participants with a range of accessibility needs. These participants are usually accessed via external agencies or dedicated firms, which are separate to the company that is seeking that insight and feedback. And this route can be easier for you as a company if you don't have an in-house user researcher or even a team and are after this specific demographic. I want to be clear and say that using agencies is not bad. They can absolutely be a necessity. We've used them absolutely, and recently too. It's just that if you can do this internally and own it yourselves in-house, working with direct clients is a really great situation. This is because if you utilize participants that already are your clients, they will have a real emotional connection to your service, even if that emotion is frustration. Agencies are a step removed. It's much harder to have a reoccurring conversation on the same topic or prototype with the same person. Also, if you use real users, then the participants aren't experienced testers. Who may see the conversation as providing a service. If they are part of an agency panel, they'll be practiced in giving feedback to companies that are new to them. And that doesn't have the same impact or weight as more candid conversations that you'll typically have with those in your existing client base. I have a good comparison I like to give for this, which is that agency participants, they could be compared to people who find surveys en masse and enterprise draws, compared to a client who clicks through to a survey from a follow-up email with a genuine HL experience to share. It's simply more organic. And so instead of out-resourcing, we have been working on bringing this in-house. And right now we have 12 confirmed panel members who have completed consent forms and interviews, and we have more on them a little later. But I've spoken plenty on what we gain as a company and a business from this. But business buy-in isn't always my top priority, especially as someone who has lived experience. So after spending years of driving a cultural shift in an organization, I want clients with access need to feel truly seen, valued, and recognized. Many of you watching may also feel the weight of the distance yet to go in your accessibility journey. And I use these sessions as a chance to say to clients that we're working on it. We know it's not far from perfect right now, but we truly are working on this. In this work, we get across our intentions and dedication to make a difference, to break down barriers, even if that isn't immediately visible on every part of our platform right now. So here is a quote from us speaking to a client when we have been wrapping up a research session. So we're learning a lot and are grateful for your time and feedback. I know there's still work to do, but we're really committed to making that happen. And in response, I've heard back, I'm very happy to get involved and participate in surveys, usability sessions, or opportunities to test updates. I'm happy to do whatever you think may be helpful. And I've heard multiple times as part of this initiative that it has helped these clients feel valued and feel listened to. In fact, our very first panel member was so keen that he recommended a friend who was also visually impaired and also already has accounts with us to become our second ever panel member. People do want to help, especially when they feel listened to. So now I get to tell you more about the experience of setting this up. There was some very important unseen groundwork that we put in to establishing this panel instead of outsourcing it to an agency, but the rewards have been worth it. So if we were to specifically ask for clients with accessibility needs to be our research participants, we had to be ready to accommodate them. We did extensive reviews of the whole end-to-end experience of being a research participant. This meant revisiting our communications and consent forms to be well structured, clear, and ensuring to remove any ambiguity. It is easy to focus on the accessibility of your client-facing web journeys, but it's also easy to forget about the other channels that are part of that experience, like the copy in your emails or the formatting of your terms and conditions. We tested the usability of our research platforms, including with various assistive technology. We have a platform at HL called Lookback. It's what we use for research. And we found some fails against WCAG, so the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. I'm sure you all know, but I have to explain an acronym. It's deeply built in me as a piece of best practice. So those WCAG guidelines, we found some instances that were not reaching those. And we reported those back to their developers. So that was, as an example, the end call button didn't have a label that could be read out to screen readers. So it was an infinite call for those users. So in the meantime, until that fix is implemented, we are using Teams or Zoom or whatever is the preference or more familiar with the participant. We very much want to meet people halfway. We also tested the usability of the reward platform that we use to send out our incentives for the research and people's time, which are gift vouchers. And if you're using one of these platforms to compensate this specific type of participant, using an inaccessible platform is low-key offensive. You have to think end to end. It's not just the research session itself that makes up that experience. I also took the opportunity to take part in other companies' research as a participant myself on that side of things. So this was with the Disability Charity Scope. I analysed the communications, processes, and tools, really the overall experience of being a participant for them in their work, and then applied these learnings to our own work and this panel we were creating. So I'd really like to recommend seeking out being a participant for companies and services that you already use, much like how new therapists have to undergo the therapy that they are about to begin practicing as part of their training. It can be really helpful to gain that perspective, being on the other side of those research conversations. I really recommend doing that. Let's go into some more details on the groundwork in our communications, consent forms, and instructions. Some of this work involved examining the language that we use and how its tone could be interpreted, grouping together information such as copy on withdrawing consent or demographic requirements, etc., specifying and reiterating any prior context that was in previous comms as reminders, and making instructions as specific as possible. I have some before and afters for you. So firstly, edits to use friendlier language. Originally, our opening email banner in a recruitment email said participant in research sessions. And once we stepped back, we realized that many people might not know what that is or what we mean or what it involves. And even this could potentially even sound clinical or medical. So instead, we changed this to be, we'd like to hear what you think, which is much less formal and easier to understand what it entails. We just want to chat about your opinion on how you're finding some things we're doing. Is hopefully much less intimidating. I have another example for changing to use friendlier language. This was the opening paragraph of a recruitment email, a research recruitment email. So this was previously, we're looking to speak with our active savings clients, and active savings is one of our products, for some upcoming research sessions, which will involve testing website content to make sure that it's easy to use. Like before, we questioned if realistically everyone would know what we meant by website content, or if using the term testing could be intimidating. So instead, we changed this to be less formal, and instead of testing, we put the emphasis on that person's opinion instead. So now we've got some new ideas for active savings. Before we change anything, we'd like to speak to our clients to make sure that the website is easy to use. Will you share your opinion with us? Next up, we had a look at our consent forms. Here is an illustration of the formatting that was in place on our previous consent forms. It's two large paragraphs of long sentences without headings or bullet points to break up the content. So whilst all of this was important information we wanted to get across to clients, the formatting being effectively a wall of text meant that it was really hard to read, and the clients weren't easily able to pick out the important themes or information. So we optimized this. There's a second illustration now, which shows us introducing clear subheadings to highlight and pull out information and sections, provide structure to the piece, and also introduce bullet points to help the scannability, making it much easier to consume. And it was just as important to spend the time understanding the accessibility of the other platforms used in our research processes, like how we host the call and how we deliver that reward or incentive for the participants' time. So the platforms we use for the research itself is Look Back, with Teams and Zoom as backups. And then Hug is the name of our incentive payment platform. I assessed each of these across keyboard navigation, screen reader experience, color contrast, how intuitive they were to use, checking against those WCAG guidelines. We found that we did find some issues, and we fed those back to the platforms themselves. To me, being aware of these downfalls and communicating them as part of this process is respectful to our participants. It shows that we recognize common access challenges beyond just the materials discussed in the session itself. So for example, Hug, which is our incentive platform, that's Hug with 3 Gs. There was a WCAG fell that we found around color contrast on a line of text giving the expiration date of the voucher. So important information. This was on their website itself before redeeming, but it was also found in the automated email that links the participant to the voucher site in high contrast black and white. So whilst it's not our platform and not something that we could directly immediately fix ourselves, what we can do is make sure to mention this expiry date when wrapping up our sessions, or we can say you're going to receive an email and it's there, you can see it in that space. So we've also paid great attention to our instructions for using these platforms, not just the platforms themselves. So changing any ambiguity or vagueness to be as specific as possible and clear up any discrepancies or uncertainties, making sure that our instructions were aligned perfectly with the text on buttons, for example. We also included when there may be browser prompts to give microphone or webcam permissions to use the site, and at what stage these could potentially occur. When using third-party platforms, I felt it important to tell participants that we can also assist and support them with troubleshooting, and just acknowledge that there may be barriers that we haven't preemptively caught or been able to address ourselves. Now let's look at some logistics. How do we recruit participants for this panel? This all began by creating an accessibility-specific channel for feedback, which is the email address, accessibility@hl.co.uk. I created that dedicated inbox, the address of which is featured throughout our formal accessibility statement page. Clients that emailed us via this route were often offered if they would like to join the panel. Later down the road, we developed the statement page further, adding a paragraph about the panel, along with a child page that's specifically about it. This covers who can join the panel, examples of the formats of research that we might reach out about, direct instructions on how to join, and all of that points back to our accessibility inbox. So we were originally intending to create a form for clients to fill in this space to register their interest, but pivoted back to using the method of people getting in touch with us via that inbox, because we really wanted to avoid capturing any unnecessary health information, because that has additional GDPR data security implications. We also kept things quite high level, so we aren't focused on diagnoses, we're focused on access need and what those people need to have equal experiences. So letting the clients choose the detail of which they disclose and just being guided by that. And these two routes, they're proactive on the client side. They reach out to us, but that is not always the case. So we also capture the opportunities of a client mentioning any accessibility needs as part of general contact to HL, whether that is phoning for assistance or already being part of a wider research session. For example, our customer service agents in our call center and online support teams were told about the panel and to signpost to that information page if they felt appropriate, and then notify the accessibility team if the client has said that they're interested. So in a similar manner, if there is a participant in our wider research sessions, in the wider research that we do at HL, who happen to share their accessibility need, we can follow up with them with information on the panel just to see if they are interested. So right now, this is the extent of our recruitment, either capturing opportunities that naturally come up to our agents or researchers, or signposting keen and curious clients that are invested enough to find, read, and engage with our accessibility statement. We currently have 12 clients officially onboarded, and there's definitely more we could be doing to grow this panel. This number could be higher, but it's simply a matter of resource. Up until this point, it has been a side of desk project for one of my wonderful accessibility ambassadors, Michelle Ho, in user research. She has been incredible in all of her work to establish this panel and the groundwork we've done together to prepare for it. The goal is that once more user researchers are confident running these sessions, we'll be able to look at more proactive recruitment on our end. An idea that we have, for example, and how we might go about that is emailing clients with accessibility needs on file who have opted into marketing emails specifically. And maybe next year I can come back and give you an update on scaling recruitment. But some examples of these 12 participants and clients, we have a range of different needs, as you would hope from a panel. So people who are hard of hearing, blind, low vision, neurodiverse, or have mobility needs affecting dexterity. We do find that the most common category or group of access needs who contact us with feedback or have shown interest in the panel is those with visual impairment, which is very interesting. I wonder if people are more used to feeding back when it's quite technical and screen reader use day to day, but there's definitely a pattern, definitely more visual impairment that people reach out about. And of course, there are clients that have multiple disabilities that bridge multiple categories of disabilities. And as someone with multiple disabilities, I ask you to keep that in mind. I filled in a lot of forms that only let me pick one disability or one category of disability, which does put you in an uncomfortable position. Do you disclose the one that is affecting you most on the day that you're filling out the form? Or do you pick the one that you think may be most relevant to the ask that you're filling the form in for? It's very common to have multiple disabilities, and just make sure that the space you're facilitating is one where they can all be discussed and accommodated and learnt from. So onto the challenges that we've experienced going through this process. This work, like any, has had its challenges. We find that often potential leads who have reached out to us either don't turn out to be clients or stop replying at some point in the fairly short induction process, usually especially once we request or propose availability for an introduction call. It does not feel right to me to nudge or chase these clients, as all of this is completely voluntary. And respecting that means that we do have a drop off in how many contacts make it through to officially join the panel, which is essentially just brief chat on your needs, fill in a consent form, have an intro call. So that is a theme that we find, because I don't want to chase people. It just does not feel right or ethical in any way. So there's also the possibility for bias. These participants may be more favorable of your products if they are so keen to give you their time and feedback. This could be balanced by getting to speak to clients who have made complaints, for example, but they aren't as likely to give us their time if we've already let them down in the past. Then there is data security and governance. It is crucial to be responsible with this data, what we collect, where we store it, who has access to it, how we share those learnings. All of that needs to be navigated with great care. We follow best practice and engage with our privacy team around this. I have a good example of that too. So I'll be sharing a clip in a few slides' time where a client consented for the recording of that session to be used for marketing and promotional materials. And while I explained what that covered, I went back and asked him his explicit consent to use the session recording in this context of this talk, because the recording of this talk isn't going to be hosted by HL. It's going to be hosted by the organizer, the Q. So it's things like that that you should really look out for and over communicate and just be certain and just show that you're being responsible with the trust of having that data. So we also found that logistically, testing later stage prototypes with this group can be challenging unless that prototype has already been built in HTML. This is because assistive technology often can't navigate a temporary prototype that has been created for the sake of a research session. Figma has recently introduced accessible prototype functionality, but there has been mixed results with that. And this means that it is much easier to do proposition or discovery type research sessions, or instead researching on pieces of work that are already live with this group. And here's some more challenges, but ones that are specific to doing this work at scale. While building the foundation of this panel, the user researcher team at HL has grown rapidly from 3 to 12 user researchers, all bringing various knowledge and experience. This team care greatly about inclusive research and want to feel confident and knowledgeable before running these sessions solo. They requested training on various topics to help them feel prepared. The most common concern was around disability language and etiquette to avoid causing any offense. They were very nervous about that. And then understanding common assistive technology that may be used by participants in their sessions, and also how to tailor sessions to accommodate different needs. On this topic, one thing that helped Michelle conduct her first sessions was running some trial sessions with external experts. So we reached out to Digital Accessibility Centre, also known as DAC, who have a large team of testers with a range of disabilities who use a range of technology. We asked them for their time to run some practice sessions and asked them to approach this as a person with accessibility needs and not a professional tester. This was a really good opportunity to sense check the communication improvements that I've shown you and also see how our processes run in practice. So the message here that I'm giving to viewers is not to be afraid to approach companies like DAC with bespoke pieces of work like this. The worst they can do is say no. And it also wasn't just the training that was needed, but also the development and agreement of internal processes surrounding utilizing the panel, such as when to run accessibility specific research and how to share the findings across the business. And I know this does sound like a lot to take on, and that is a big reason why agencies can be traditionally used, especially for the smaller companies. So here is some footage of one of our introduction calls. As before, this client has given us full permission to use the footage externally for this purpose, and it was hosted on Microsoft Teams. And I'm going to share a screen recording of that session. So you will hear Michelle, one of our accessibility ambassadors and user researchers, introduce the session. I wanted to leave that in because I was hoping it could give a good insight into the tone of these calls and how we approach them. So this example in particular was great for proving business benefit. This client was let down by one of our competitors after they dismissed his request for assistance and therefore ultimately autonomy to make these deals independently. He has a very significant portfolio and reached out via the previously mentioned inbox saying that he had invested a lump sum specifically due to HL's accessibility in comparison to the other experiences he has had with other companies in our immediate surrounding industry. It's about 3 minutes long. I will hit play and leave it with you guys to watch.
Happy to hear you're interested in joining our accessibility research.
Just from the beginning.
We're really happy to hear you're interested in joining our accessibility research panel. And so we'd love to hear more about your experience today. Just a bit of background on accessibility at HL. It's something that's really important to us, but we're also very aware as a company that there's still a lot to learn and improve in this area. And so what we're hoping to do by this panel is regularly involve our clients in interviews and surveys and really start including you in our research and better understand just our clients' needs in these areas. And so before we jump into it, just a couple of things so you're aware and comfortable of what topics we'll be covering in the next half hour. We're just going to be asking about your HL experience, like what products you use, a little bit about the assistive tech that you use as well, and also just your I guess your preferences in terms of like research topics that you'd like to cover. You mentioned something about being more interested in the technical side of things, so just finding out a little bit more about that. And then also just to say everything we collect today will be confidential and anonymized, so please don't hesitate to speak your mind. At later points, if we want to share your story with the wider company, we'll of course like ask your permission before we do so as well. Great. Do you have any questions about any of that?
No, it's fine.
Okay, great. So if you could just start by telling me a little bit about the HL products you currently have and how are you finding like using Hargreaves Lansdown so far?
Well, as I said to you, I think to Michelle or something, I'm saying I actually got into this because of the positive stuff from you folks. I was contrasted with Vanguard, whose accessibility was terrible. And I actually complained to them about or asked them about this. All I asked for was that their team should tell me what's being done. And I got no response or next to no response. I couldn't use their website, and their answer was I should get one of the family to do it. I was saying I was having problems with the website, just trying to make a deal on an indexed fund. And they told me I should just get one of the family to do it. Well, that was the end for them. It cost them 200,000 quid.
Right.
So your accessibility is worth it because you've got 200,000 quid that came your way recently that wouldn't have. So there's the business answer to it. If it has to be like that, it's obviously, I'd rather we're getting a human answer, but in terms of the business, actually they lost it.
So after watching that, everyone who has ever presented the importance of accessibility to a stakeholder or to leadership can imagine how good of a day this was when this came in and having that call. It's a dream of a clip to really help show the return on investment, but also just how important it is to enable autonomy and not tell people to get a family member to do it. It's not a respectful way to approach someone facing those challenges. So it's a lovely, good story to tell. But yes, I'm sure many people are used to presenting the business case of accessibility and can tell that was a good day when we had that session.
We're really happy to.
So we're coming to the end of this talk now. I wanted to start wrapping up. So if you are feeling inspired by this, and hopefully you are, and want to explore gaining these rare insights for yourself, this is the advice I would give you, both as a disabled person and someone whose career is based on valuing this community. So know that while it is rarer, you most likely already have some accessibility needs specific feedback via your contact channels. Those users are already there to learn and listen from. And you can start this slowly. One conversation with one user is far better than none at all. Remember that if one part of your processes or end-to-end journey is not accessible, it'll let down your hard work. So improve what you can, but be mindful of and offer support for what you can't. And finally, whether you're a researcher or not, prepare yourself to feel confident having conversations around accessibility need and disability. Get familiar with etiquette. There's a few URLs on the slide, and the slides are also shared later on, that can help with that. So I'd really recommend starting with the social model of disability, recognizing privilege, meeting people halfway, and also learning about language and its implications, mirroring back what the individual uses to describe how they identify. That is my talk. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to get to share this work, and I'd love to move into answering some questions.
Thank you so much, Zoe. That was a great presentation. So many great things to take away from that. You were awesome. Really good questions as well in the chat. Thank you everyone for getting involved. Couple of things in the chat I just wanted to read out. Robin was saying he really appreciated seeing you playing with the fidget, just like he is now. So loved seeing that. Martha loves your hair color, and everyone wants to buy your cat furniture now, because that is our top topic. And my first question actually out of Q&A is, what are your cats' names? It was one of our top voted questions.
This is my favorite question. I have three girls with my wife. First one's called Pecan, as in pecan pie. We have a Luna, and we also have a Jelly Tot.
Jelly Tot. So, awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, I've not had a Jelly Tot for years. Very good sweeties. I'm not sure if you get them in the US. Brilliant. Excellent names. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste into our chat so you can see this next question. So that's there for you. But this has come from Joppy. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Apologies if I'm not. But he wanted to ask, how do you make sure not to burn out the user testers? So he says he's advocated to prefer to use professional disabled testers because he's sure that the testers would be bombarded with questions from many of the development teams.
Okay, I will just make sure I read and have that. So I'm imagining user testers refers to the participants giving their feedback rather than the user researchers.
Yes.
So I would say we have in HL, we kind of track how much contact you've had with someone. So in the same way that with marketing campaigns, if you know someone has just received a few emails for a specific survey or offer, you kind of have some downtime between the next time you're given emails like that. And one of the things that we are very aware of is when was the last time we reached out to those people. And that would, I believe, be continued to be monitored. So you wouldn't, it's a case of this panel is used kind of via us or in collaboration with the accessibility team. So it wouldn't be a case of, you know, they're invited to every single session. I think there is a level of, oh, they recently helped us with this or got involved with this, so we won't contact them for another like 3 months. Just kind of give people space, because again, we're very aware that this is completely voluntary. And you know, they may be asked this kind of feedback often. So it's also the environment. So they're mostly one-on-one interviews with user researchers, meaning that you know, we're able to kind of approach what we want to gain from the session and do that with care. So there's almost a filter between all of the knowledge that we want to capture and what is a reasonable ask of someone giving their time and experience voluntarily. But I think it's kind of part of the wider research practice that people are aware of. A very light touch example is, you know, survey fatigue. I suppose that's part of the profession, where we just are aware of how much we're asking of them and very respectful of any rearranging or no thank yous.
Yeah, I think what you said earlier as well in the talk about not chasing people and not, you know, if they drop off, they drop off. I think that's a really key thing to consider as well, being considerate of people's times. Excellent answer, Zoe. I've got another. Oh, sorry, please.
That's just kind of the tone I go into this with, is just like grateful and appreciative, and whatever time or insight someone's able to give us, that's amazing. Thank you so much. But I don't expect this of people. I'm very aware of the day-to-day. And yeah, it's all voluntary, and it comes from a place of like respect and wanting people to feel valued. So I think that's kind of built into part of that side of how we approach it.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's the right approach, and it goes to show what you've built already in that sense. So, so I've got another question from Robert. I'm just going to post that in the chat for you, lovely.
Cool.
So he wants to build an internal research panel, and he says we have been pushed back by the legal team due to screening for people's abilities. So we're talking about a healthcare company here. So he says, in case of external panels, we can't use them as it's too costly. Do you maybe have, so the question really is, do you maybe have a recommendation on how we can build an internal panel made from our colleagues and co-workers?
Love this question. We've actually considered similar. So first of all, yeah, I have heard that sometimes legal or regulatory areas of the business aren't the biggest fans of using external companies too. So I think that's fairly common challenge to face. But I would say that in terms of building it internally, there's quite a few things to consider there of this work, but tripled. So someone, you know, there may be a level of bias because not only are you giving your time to this research, you're also behind the scenes. You're seeing the messages from the CEO and you're part of the culture. So that's a really big part of it when it comes to involving colleagues and co-workers. Another thing with that is, you know, the kind of responses you're giving, it's your place of work. You may not want to be honest or blunt. I've spoken to other accessibility leads about this at events organised by DQ and AbilityNet, where I met Natalie before, so it's really nice to have a familiar face. And you know, some places have pursued that and done that, but you have to do it with even more care because it's disclosing things that you may not have talked about at work if you don't wish to. There's a lot more factors when it comes to colleagues. I've also heard from a peer that colleagues are often really interested in the research process and the way that that company does it, and will want to talk more about the environment of a session than the content in a session. That's been a theme that's been picked up too. So there's a lot to consider. You may be able to approach, if you have any disability networks like we do at HL, may be able to say there, you know, this is what we're asking for. But yes, in terms of data privacy and all of that, it's almost heightened when it's your place of work. So just be aware of those challenges. But I'd also say the burnout for those participants would potentially be higher because there'll be a higher demand than maybe from external participants. There's a bit more to consider when someone is even closer to the company in terms of what you find. I hope that was helpful.
I think that was a great answer. I think, like you say, it's many common challenges, but they're much more heightened, and the bias that can bring into it, I think, is a really good point to make. That's not something I would have considered. So excellent. So we've got about 6 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you a few more questions, Medallion.
Yes.
This one has come from Max. I'm going to paste that into our chat there for you. So Max is really looking for suggestions for difficulties related to compensation. So not just getting budgets to do that, but also potential I don't know how to say this, bureaucratic? I think that's it. Bureaucratic obstacles to offering cash feedback, that offering something like gift cards or low amounts is like expecting free work from an already potentially underemployed, you know, population, etc.
And again, this is another part of what I take into this approach for this panel is the awareness that it can be free work. And that's also relevant when it comes to co-workers and colleagues, because how does that balance against their day job and the emotional strain of giving that feedback and how it could affect, you know, your other responsibilities and all of that. I would say that we already had a bit of an established system because HL already does user research, and that has a setup for incentives and how those work. So when it comes to the accessibility ones, you know, I do completely trust the setup and amounts of that team that already have, but I am aware of that it is potentially like free work. So it's definitely a consideration that's built in. So I'm just having a scan to see. Yeah, I basically utilized what was already established in the company, and it is similar that it is often gift cards, because there's also challenges there about if it counts as income, and if a part of this population is underemployed and maybe on means tested benefits, for example, like that counts as income. That's quite disruptive potentially for them. So it's really good to be aware of those societal structures and impacts going into working with this group specifically. Again, it's kind of part of the responsible approach and respectful approach we take to it. But I have definitely been concerned about that in the past, and I would say that we're quite like light touch. We have not asked a big amount from the panel so far, because I'm very much aware of that as someone who is balancing access needs and health conditions outside of work too.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry to not have many suggestions, but just
I think it's a tough one.
solidarity.
I think just showing your process of how you've done that though is helpful as well. So I hope that answered your question there. Got another one here from Robin. I'm going to paste two bits in here because he kind of refined his question afterwards, so it kind of makes sense. But he was really asking because he noticed that you weren't mentioning aging populations in your client body, and he wanted to know if that's something you're addressing. Are there any specific ways you're addressing that? And then he also said, and I'm going to paste that in as well. He said that realizing that reaching older people might be built in due to your services, addressing pensioners. So he said, he guess a better question would be, are you tailoring that to them in any way? So are you tailoring that to an older population at all?
Love that. So I would say a huge part of HL is retirement and pensions. So we have a client base that we look at it in terms of decades of life and life stages, and it's very common that so much of the research that is done is around that transition in claiming your pension. So it is already a general part of how we do research. So that's why it's not specifically called out, although I would say that often the accessibility needs that get disclosed and people that approach us are new to having disabilities. They, how it goes from 1 in 5 in the population to 1 in 2. At retirement age, they reach out and we're in those conversations assisting back and forth. So it is not that I haven't specifically included them, it's that it's already quite a big awareness. And there's also lines of access needs, what people identify with, because it's common that older people will have much larger font size on their phone, but they may not identify that as an access need and opt into a panel like this that is called that way. But research is still done with them, and we're still learning all we can about their experiences. It's just that it's already kind of part of the general approach to research, I would say.
Yeah. No, that's a great answer.
Yeah.
We've got 1 more minute left, so I'm just looking for a quick question that we could answer quickly. Okay, I'm going to go with, pressure. Just find a good one. Oh, so this is quite a good one. This is from Remy. I'm just going to pop that in your chat again.
Thank you.
Just really quickly. So they just wanted to know, was there any pushback with simplifying of the language that you did on your consent forms from a legal perspective, and how was that handled, if there was?
Interesting. Yes, I mean, I'm sure others will know that it can be a challenge to find those compromises, especially with simplified language. It wasn't, I suppose, we didn't have much pushback because it was more about, I don't think the consent forms were particularly technical in the first place. It was more about what we could do to style them to help them be more consumable. but with language of research session instead being like conversation about your opinions isn't necessarily legal red flags. So the things that were kind of optimized weren't exactly like legislation or particularly important phrases, more around consent, and it was just how we structured that to make the information more consumable. It was more the language of our communications than our technical consent forms, I would say. Cool.
Thank you for answering that. Right. Thank you so much, Zoe. That was an awesome session.